I'm going to try a new thing today, but let me know if you like it. How can you let me know? Well, you can email me, james@themindfulplace.net, or you can leave a review. There are some reviews on iTunes and some of the other podcast platforms, but I've been meaning to ask this of you all, but I just keep forgetting. When you put those reviews, it is helpful for the podcast in general in terms of letting it be known. Oh, another thing I'm doing today that's new is I'm just playing some music, like normal music that I would be listening to. I'm just going to leave it on in the background. So you can let me know how that goes if you like that. And also this new thing that I'm trying. But yeah, I would love to hear your reviews because really that's the only feedback I have on what it is you like about the podcast, what it is you don't like. You could send me an email, let me know. I like the guided meditations. I like when you just talk. I like when you have conversations with people. I like when you do a reflective journal, which is what today is going to be. This is new. I don't think I've ever done this before. But we are getting close to 100 episodes in the podcast. The podcast is 2 years old almost. I started, I think, June or July 6th of 2018. So now we have another month or two, less than a month, or maybe 6 weeks. I don't know if it was June or July, until we're 2 years in. And at this point, we have 98 episodes. 2 episodes from now will be the 100th episode. And there are 14,000 views on the podcast. So for those of you who listen all the time, thank you very much for listening. And please continue to share with your family or friends that you think would enjoy the podcast, because I don't really do any advertising or anything like that. Sometimes I post it on Facebook or Instagram, but really the only way people find out about it is if you, the listener, shares it. And that would be helpful for me and for the podcast in general. But for those of you who are already listening, I appreciate you being with me. Some of you have sent me messages on Facebook or Instagram saying how it has been helpful, and I would love to hear more of that. How it is helpful. How it could be more helpful. Okay. I'm going to try just an open journaling. Normally when I do these episodes, I have something planned. Not completely structured, but like a rough plan of what I'm going to speak about. And today I don't really have that. I'm just going to kind of see what comes up in my own experience, like a reflection. When I teach mindfulness programs, a lot of times I will guide a meditation practice, and then there will be a period of reflection where 2 people sit together, or 3 people, or a whole group of people sit together, and I ask the question, what is coming up for you now? What is here for you now? What was your experience in this practice? So I'm going to do that authentically in real time with you all. What is coming up for me now? The reason I'm doing this is because I think it's a good practice to get into, to stop and pause and ask yourself the question, what's here for me now? What's coming up? It's a stop and a reflection in emotional and cognitive identification, cognitive recognition, and processing of what is here. Because if you listen to one of my episodes recently about water, I find it helpful for me to continue to process emotions, continue to identify them, process them, feel them, work through them. so that they're not latent in me. I've been sitting more in my practice. My practice is taking 3 forms right now, my formal practice. I try to wake up and stretch on every weekday. I try to stretch for 20 to 30 minutes. But I also listen to a teaching by Ram Dass. Right now, he happens to be the teacher that I'm listening to a lot. And I also listen to this playlist that we're listening to right now. It's on Spotify. It's called Lo-Fi Hip Hop Music Beats to Relax /Study To. It is, I think, somewhere between 8 to 10 hours long. And I love it. I used to listen to it when I was studying a lot or when I'm just relaxing. But what I've been doing lately is in the morning, I stretch or do movement yoga. I put a Ram Dass teaching on my TV on YouTube. So it's usually just audio, and then on my Google Home, I play this music. So there's the music going on, there's the teaching going on, and I'm stretching and doing yoga. And I guess what I'm learning is that I kind of used to, because of my training in mindfulness-based stress reduction, I kind of got used to doing yoga and meditation, but more so yoga in silence. And I'm kind of stepping out of that box and realizing that there was a box there, at least in my mind. I mean, nobody ever really told me that I couldn't listen to something while I was doing yoga. But I just sort of had it in my mind that they were separate. And, it may or may not be something you want to try to do, but for me right now it feels right. And that's really what it is all about, I think, is self-care, tuning into what the needs are. And right now this is my need. So it's been helping me, listening to Ram Dass, stretching, and then after I stretch, I sit in meditation, usually for 20 to 30 minutes in the morning of sitting practice after the yoga. So maybe the whole practice is somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour. But before I stretch, I usually go out in the garden for a little bit. I have my vegetable garden. For those of you who are listening, of course, you know that already. But like this morning, I went out there and I was watering the garden and weeding the garden. And that, too, is a meditation. Walking through the garden, feeling my feet on the ground, feeling the dirt, picking the weeds out, feeling the weeds, watering the plants, sitting and looking at them. I have a tree stump that I put in my garden, and I just sit on the stump and I watch the garden. I watch the bugs fly around, pollination happening right in front of me. I watch the birds. There's one blue jay who goes in the same spot on the same tree every day. Not always the same time, but usually at a close time. And a lot of times he'll fly from that one tree to a post in the east corner of my garden, the southeast corner of my garden. It's a post. And this blue jay flies from that tree to that post almost every day. And I also noticed that after I mow the lawn, usually on Sundays, within an hour to 3 after I mow the lawn, there's a lot of birds that come and they're picking around the ground where I just mowed the lawn. I don't know if it's easier for them to access the bugs in there or if they're using the fresh clippings for their nests. I'm not sure, but it's interesting to stop and watch nature. These birds, they're not there in groups like that often, but after I mow the lawn, they are. So it's been an interesting journey of just like stopping and watching nature. That's a meditation, sitting by the window or sitting outside and watching the butterflies, watching the birds fly, collecting things for their nests, hearing the birds' songs. If you look really closely at the soil, there's millions of organisms alive in the soil. So another practice that I do is I just watch the soil. It looks static, but if you look closely, it's very active. There's a lot of life going on in there. I read recently, I don't remember it exactly, so don't quote me on it, but I think there's something like there's more life, there's more living organisms in a red Solo cup worth of compost or living soil than the entire human population, which is pretty wild. Sometimes I just stop, look at the stars. And that helps me personally helps me feel grounded. And I recognize how minuscule I am in the vast multiverse. And it helps me put my problems into perspective. Things that might feel stressful, like, I don't know, any kind of thing. You have a leaky faucet, or you're overworked, or something stressful has come up with your kids, or any kind of thing. It's when I sit under the stars and I just look at the stars, it reminds me that whatever stress I'm feeling right now is a speck of nothing in the scheme of everything. I mean, there are bigger things that hurt and they're worth looking at, but I don't know. When I get lost in the vastness of the universe, it could just be settling for me. I was outside last night. My wife and I went for a walk about 7:30, and it started, the sun is setting around here at that time. So we walked around the block, and then we came home, and I went out in the garden, and the sun was almost completely set. And then in the neighbor's yard, there's a lot of woods in the neighbor's backyard, and there's no house there. There used to be someone there, but they knocked the house down. So right now it's a vacant lot, and the neighbor's backyard is overgrown with weeds and grass and shrubs. So the deer come out of the woods and they start eating the grass, the weeds, and they're just grazing. Last night we were walking and my wife and I stopped and we were maybe 15 feet from the fence, and on the other side of the fence the deer were grazing. They came closer, they're grazing. And one of them was sort of right up against the fence, not that far away. They weren't really scared of us. And they were just eating and looking at us, and then eating and looking at us. And then I waved. I waved to the deer. And the deer wagged its tail. And I looked at my wife and I smiled. I was like, I think he's waving back. She, actually. I think she's waving back. And my wife said, wave again. So I waved again. And the deer wagged its tail again. So then I waited 2-3 minutes. I'm like, maybe it's a coincidence. 2-3 minutes I didn't wave, and the deer didn't wag its tail. Then after 3 minutes, the deer looked up at me, I waved again, and it wagged its tail. Sure enough, 4 or 5 times. Only after I waved did the deer wag its tail. Now I don't know if it's coincidence, but to me, it was a mirroring, because I realized deers can't wave. They can't wave with their hooves. So that's really the only way they could wave, is to wag their tail. It was just kind of interesting thing. And then somebody started, 2 houses down, somebody started started a chainsaw, and the deer ran back into the woods. And then as I continued to watch, somebody was cutting down a tree that had to be 50 to 100-year-old tree, massive, massive tree. Somebody had climbed up the tree and was cutting it down. And it's just like, it's just the contrast of these peaceful animals coming out of the woods, grazing, and just nature doing its thing. The bluebird on the tree, the bugs in the soil, the birds in the grass, nature doing its thing. And then man with the chainsaw cutting it down. It was just like, okay. But that, I've been listening to a lot of Ram Dass, and what he would say, I think, there is that has to be okay. That has to be okay too, because it's all part of it. Man is part of this collective organism. I don't know. This is where my mind goes. I named the podcast Wondering Together because I'm constantly wondering. I'm a very curious person. And if you stop and pay attention, there's a lot we can learn from nature. I use my vegetables as metaphors, different plants and trees, water, but the birds too, and the deer too. Like, when those deer are just walking through the grass, grazing and eating, there's nothing more to it. They're just eating. It's very mindful, actually. They're just eating. And just being in their presence is a reminder. It's like if you've ever been around, a dog or a cat or a baby or a bird. Anything that's not really thinking too much into it. They're just being. I think when we get older, at least in the culture I grew up in, we start to move from being towards doing. And it's hard to get out of that doing. And the doing is necessary. We have to make money, we have to pay our bills, we have to take care of our responsibilities. We have to take care of our parents, take care of our children. We have to be there for our friends if they lose someone. There are appointments that we have to make. There are leaky faucets. There are broken light bulbs. There are things that we have to do. There's plenty of doing. But we don't, or I don't, often, hold on, I'm going to rephrase that. There's plenty of doing that we can be doing. But what helps me live in a deeper, more connected way is when I'm holding that doing in a greater space. In other words, I could be out in the garden and feeling stressed because I'm doing work, meaning shoveling dirt, moving dirt, setting up the irrigation system, weeding. That can feel like a nuisance. That can feel like a lot of work. Or I can feel my feet on the ground, feel my hands in the dirt, feel the wind on my face, feel the shovel hit the dirt. It can be a mindfulness exercise. So it's really a matter of perspective. The activity hasn't changed. The doing is still happening. But it's the attitude and the awareness that I bring to the doing that has changed. And that can really apply anywhere. At work, when you're changing the light bulb, when you're driving to work, there's the doing that is happening. This constant doing. This constant keeping up with the responsibilities. And then there is this awareness that sees it all. And that awareness is mindfulness. That is what we're practicing. So why couldn't we apply it all throughout our lives? Why couldn't we be watching in awareness all the doing as it's happening? It's not that we need to stop all doing. We don't need to retreat to some cave somewhere and meditate for 10 years. We just have to be aware. Sometimes it can be very hard because the doing can hijack us. Like we We, we try to fix the faucet in the basement and it breaks, and then it floods the whole basement. And we get filled with frustration and anger and fear that we won't be able to financially recover, and all the phone calls that we might have to make to help solve this problem. And it's really hard to be aware during that, because it's very easy to just react in the emotion and get pulled along this journey of worry and fear and anxiety and racing thoughts. But the awareness that is aware of those things is the same awareness that we bring to the breath when we're sitting in a breath practice. It's the same awareness that we bring to the sound. It may not feel as peaceful and as nice, but it's no different. And mindfulness is really not about, it's not about being peaceful. It's not about being any certain way. It's a practice of awareness. And awareness must and does include all things, including the hijacked mind, including strong emotions. That has to be included, because awareness and mindfulness includes all things. It includes the moments where you're trying to practice and you feel frustrated about the practice because you don't feel calm or you don't feel aware and mindful. It's that too is in awareness. Ram Dass says a lot, and this too, this as well, and this too. He gave an example where he had a request for a microphone at a lecture that he gave. And when he got there, they didn't have the right microphone, and he got angry. And then he stopped and he started to laugh. And they asked, "Why are you laughing?" And he realized that he'd been caught. He realized that his mind had been hijacked. And he made something, he made a problem of it. And he had an attachment to the microphone, the type of microphone. There's so many attachments that can catch us, keep us caught. Okay, I think I'll stop here for today. But again, I will ask, today was more of a open reflection. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's not really much different, except that I didn't have a specific thing in mind that I was going to talk about. But I would just love to hear some feedback. Do you feel it was different? Do you feel it was the same? Do you feel it's helpful? You could either leave formal reviews on the iTunes or on whatever podcast platform allows for reviews, or send me an email with some reviews. Also, if you have questions, email me your questions, or put the questions on the Facebook page, and I will try to answer them. Okay, take care.